Let's welcome on board Jan Das Gupta, former ambassador and representative of India at the WTO. And also joining is Mr. Ajay Sahai, DG and CEO of Federation of Indian Export Organizations. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Mr. Das Gupta, let's begin with you. And just like my colleague Sumita was highlighting, this is not much of a change. The new tariffs that have been imposed are not very different from the Liberation Day tariffs that we've seen. Help us understand how this would impact global trade. Are we expecting any further change than we have already seen that's happening geopolitically? Because on Japan and Malaysia, if I'm not wrong, these are the only two countries where tariffs have been very nominally hiked. Other than that, it's either at par or lower than Liberation Day tariffs. So what is your sense on this?
I think the US has realized that having very high tariffs is going to hurt its own domestic constituents and also lead to inflationary pressures and perhaps in the not too distant future, recession. So they have decided to moderate their ambition in terms of raising the tariffs. And that is why you see that apart from a few countries out of the 14, the tariffs which have been now communicated through these letters are lower than what had been announced on July 2nd. But having said that, these tariffs are also excessively high. And they are going to indeed create problems for the domestic consumers and the corporates and also lead to supply chain disruptions. The US revenues have shown a buoyancy. I think about $85 billion were collected by way of import tariffs for the first few months since the Trump tariffs came into force. But this is not going to last very long because surveys have shown that 60% of the tariff revenue collected has been passed on to the consumers. And the rest, of course, has been shared by the importers as well as by the exporters. But exporters may continue to take on a little bit of the burden. But the consumers, if you expect them to take on 60% of the burden for an indefinitely long period, that is not going to last. So then imports will constrict. Production in the US, especially for those which are dependent on supply chains, they will also shrink. And that will cause pressures on the economy, on the employment front, growth front, etc. So on the sustainability aspect,
Yes, that's the impact, or rather the analysis that Mr. Das Gupta just helped us with. But Ajay, just wanted to have your take on what's the expectation right now for the Indian markets, because if we go by the trend, or rather what has been announced so far, is there been no significant change from the Liberation Day tariff. Can this case hold true for India as well, which is where we already had an announcement of 26% slash to 10% as the baseline tariff, but are there any concerns that it can once again go near back to those levels, or rather a level around 20 odd levels can one be ready for?
Yeah, if you look into the tariff, you have rightly said there is not much difference except for some of the countries, Laos and Myanmar, where they have reduced the tariff to 40%. This was something which was unexpected line because if you look into the transshipment clause into US Vietnam FTA, they have put it at 40%. So I was expecting that on ASEAN countries where transshipment is possible, they will not like to keep a duty above 40%. Coming back to India, I think the very fact that they will be imposing these tariffs from 1st of August now will give little more elbow room to the negotiator. We already are inching towards a BTA, and there may be few contentious issues, as rightly pointed out, you relating to GM food or agriculture or dairy products. Probably that gives us little more time to the negotiator so sort out those issues. I'm particularly of the view that we will be able to get a good deal, and looking into some of these tariffs which has been imposed on these countries, we will have much more comparative advantage also. But please bear in mind that these tariffs are also temporary. If these countries go into the further negotiation with the US, these can be brought down. If these countries reciprocate with tariff and retaliate that, it may go up also. So the kind of uncertainty which was there, to some extent, it continues. And we have to see how it will its impact on the global trade. We have seen that even WTO has downwardly revised the forecast from 2.7% growth in the global trade. They are talking about 5% contraction. It may be a further contraction if these kinds of tariffs continue to be imposed on countries.
Hi, you did say that India could have a competitive advantage compared to our neighbors in the Southeast Asian region that have been imposed with tariffs. Could you elaborate on that point a little bit further? Which sectors do you believe could do well in terms of exports now that you have tariffs on Bangladesh, Japan, South Korea?
No, in fact, if you look into some of the countries, we were facing a lot of competition with Cambodia, Myanmar, Bangladesh, particularly in the textile sector in some of these countries, even in the footwear sector. So definitely, even assuming that 26% tariff remains if BTA is not coming into place, we will be much better than these. China, the one of the competitor of India, will continue to have a tariff of 55%. Vietnam will be now at 20%. Little advantage will be there. So assuming that there is no further going forward on the BT and the 26% tariff is imposed, with some of the countries on which the high reciprocal tariff is there, we are better off. And probably with some of the countries, we may lose out. But I'm pretty confident that since he has talked about the FTA going forward with India and we are a strategic partner with India, I'm expecting something to happen very shortly. We not have a complete deal on the goods part, but to a large extent, most of the issues on which concession on the goods have to flow, probably that can be decided. There may be some contentious issues which can be held back by India, and in reciprocity, US can also hold back tariff on some of the goods also.
That's an interesting take, Mr. Sahai. But given the fact that there hasn't been no significant change, what already that has been announced, and the kind of tone that actually Donald Trump has set in. But with this, we are actually running a bit low on time. But with this, would like to thank you, Mr. Sahai, as well as Mr. Dasgupta, for actually taking the time out and helping us understand that what the tariff implications could mean for various industries, and rather what could be in the store for the Indian markets as well. Thank you so much for that.